December 20th, 1943. 15,000 feet altitude. Frozen skies over Nazi Germany. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this scene. You're piloting a B-17 Flying Fortress bomber weighing 30 tons. The metal around you is riddled with hundreds of bullet holes. The smell of gunpowder, blood, and burning fuel fills your nostrils. Through the intercom, you hear only muffled groans and deadly silence. Half your crew is unconscious or dead. Your aircraft, which should be flying at 400 kilometers per hour, can barely maintain 250. The tail is half torn off, swaying in the wind like a tattered flag. Engine number 2 is on fire, spitting black smoke that stains the blue-gray winter sky of Germany. You are alone, completely alone over enemy territory, 300 kilometers from the nearest safety. That's when you hear the sinister roar of a Daimler-Benz DB605 engine. Your blood freezes. You know that sound? It's a German Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter, the most lethal killing machine in European skies. You turn your head to the right and see the angular silhouette approaching. The fighter is perfect. Impeccable paint, propeller spinning with deadly precision, MG-17 machine guns pointed directly at your heart. You close your eyes and whisper a prayer. This is your last sight on Earth. But when you open your eyes again, something impossible is happening. The German pilot isn't shooting. He's only 10 meters away, looking directly into your eyes through the cockpit glass. And he's gesturing, not with anger, not with threat, but with something you'd never expect to see on a Nazi pilot's face: concern. What happened in the next 30 minutes over the frozen clouds of Germany is one of the most extraordinary and secret stories of World War II. A story that American and German military kept classified for decades. A story that challenges everything we think we know about war, honor, enmity, and human nature in its most extreme moments. This is the true story of Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler, two men who met as mortal enemies and parted as something much deeper. And I guarantee one thing, after hearing this complete account, based on declassified documents, personal diaries, and exclusive interviews with the protagonists, you'll never see World War II or human nature the same way again. Because sometimes in the middle of hell, humanity finds a way to survive. Charles Charlie Brown, yes, that was really his name, was born in 1922 on a small farm in the mountains of West Virginia. Son of German farmers who had emigrated to America in the early 20th century, Charlie grew up hearing stories about the old homeland told by his grandfather in broken German mixed with American English. Ironically, the boy who would one day be saved by a German pilot had grown up with deep admiration for German culture. His grandfather told him about the forests of Bavaria, about the precision of German engineering, about a hard-working and honorable people who had built some of the world's most impressive machines. Charlie was the typical American boy of the 1930s, tall, blonde, blue eyes, easy smile, and an obsessive passion for airplanes. Since age 8, he built wooden models of World War I biplanes. At 12, he knew by heart the technical specifications of all American fighters. At 16, he had already decided he would be a pilot. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Charlie was 19 and in his second year of engineering college. The next day, he dropped out and enlisted in the Army Air Force. "I'm going to teach those Nazis a lesson and be back for Christmas 1942, he wrote to his girlfriend Ruth, a sweet brown-haired girl he'd met at the local church. Charlie had no idea the war would last 4 bloody years, or that he himself would barely survive to see Christmas 1943. Flight training was brutal. Of the 200 cadets who started the program with Charlie, only 47 graduated as pilots. Charlie wasn't among them. His coordination was good, but not exceptional. Instead, he was assigned as co-pilot of a B-17 bomber. "It's not exactly what I dreamed of," he wrote to Ruth in March 1943, "but at least I'll fly, and I'll help shorten this war." In September 1943, Charlie was sent to England, to Kimballton Air Base, headquarters of the 379th Bombardment Group. His first sight of the base was depressing. Damp wooden barracks, muddy runway, and dozens of B-17s in various stages of repair, some with bullet holes so large a man could pass through them. The base commander, Colonel Maurice Preston, gathered the new pilots on the first day. "Gentlemen, you're here for a simple mission. Bomb Nazi Germany until it surrenders. The life expectancy of a bomber crew over enemy territory is 11 missions. You need to complete 25 missions to go home. Do the math. Charlie did the math. The survival chances were approximately 8%, but he was young, immortal in his own mind, and firmly believed that fortune favors the brave. Besides, he had Ruth waiting for him at home, and a bright future as an aeronautical engineer planned for after the war. What Charlie didn't know was that on the other side of the English Channel, another young pilot was making very similar calculations, but with a completely different perspective on who were the good guys and bad guys in that war. Franz Stigler was born in 1915 in Regensburg, Bavaria, in the heart of Germany. Son of a World War I veteran who had served as a reconnaissance pilot, Franz grew up in a military family where honor, discipline, and love of country were unquestionable values. But the Stigler family wasn't Nazi. Franz's father, August Stigler, was an old-school Prussian military man who despised the vulgarity and extremism of the National Socialist Party. "A soldier serves Germany, not politicians," he used to tell his son. Franz was 7 years older than Charlie Brown, and when the war began in 1939, he was already an experienced Luftwaffe pilot with more than 1,000 flight hours. Tall, thin, perfectly combed blonde hair and aviator glasses that became his trademark, Franz had the appearance of the ideal Aryan pilot that Nazi propaganda loved to display. But behind the impeccable appearance, Franz carried deep pain. In 1940, his younger brother, August Jr., had been shot down over France piloting a Stuka. He was only 18 years old. His brother's death transformed Franz from a competent pilot into an implacable war machine. Between 1940 and 1943, he accumulated 27 confirmed victories, most against Allied fighters, but also some bombers. Each victory was small revenge for August Jr.'s death. Franz flew a customized Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6, painted grey-blue with a small black cross on the fuselage, not the Nazi swastika, but the traditional German Iron Cross. In the cockpit, he kept a photo of August Jr. and a small Bible that had belonged to his grandfather. Despite his lethal efficiency in the air, Franz maintained a rigid code of honor he had learned from his father. Ein Soldat kämpft gegen Soldaten, nicht gegen Wehrlose. A soldier fights against soldiers, not against the defenseless. Du schießt niemals auf einen Mann im Fallschirm. You never shoot at a man in a parachute. Ehre ist wichtiger als Sieg. Honor is more important than victory. These principles would put Franz in direct conflict with Nazi orders that demanded total war against all enemies, civilian or military. But in December 1943, Franz still believed he could serve Germany without compromising his soul. He didn't know he was about to face the greatest moral test of his life. Kimbolton Air Base in December 1943 was a microcosm of the Allied war effort. More than 2,000 men lived and worked on that piece of English land, converted into a machine of industrial destruction. Charlie Brown had completed 24 bombing missions, one more than the statistical life expectancy. He was now a veteran, one of the few original pilots from his class who was still alive. Of the 47 pilots who had arrived with him in September, only 12 were still operational. The others had been shot down, wounded, or suffered nervous breakdowns. The crew of B-17 Ye Old Pub consisted of 10 men. Charlie Brown, 21 years old, co-pilot Spencer Pinky Luke, 23 years old, main pilot Samuel Sam Blackford, 20 years old, navigator Howard Eckie Eckenrode, 19 years old, bombardier Richard Pechote, 22 years old, flight engineer Lloyd Doc Jennings, 24 years old, radio operator Alex Yogi Yelisanko, 21 years old, left waist gunner Huey Eckenrode, 18 years old, right waist gunner Howard's brother Clarence Red Huntley, 20 years old, tail gunner Albert Al-Sadok, 19 years old, ball turret gunner. They were boys far from home, fighting a war they barely understood, united only by the need to survive and the hope of returning to their families. On the morning of December 20th, 1943, they woke up not knowing they were about to participate in one of the war's most dangerous missions, and an encounter that would forever change the definition of enemy. 5:30 a.m. Kimbolton Air Base, England. The alarm sounded like a banshee's scream, cutting through the frozen silence of the English dawn. Charlie Brown woke instantly. After 24 missions, the body develops reflexes that the conscious mind doesn't even notice. He knew from the specific tone of the alarm that it wasn't a drill. It was mission day. In the damp, cold barracks, 40 men moved like ghosts in the twilight. Nobody talked much on mission mornings. Each man was lost in his own preparation rituals. Some prayed, others wrote quick letters home. Many simply dressed in silence, trying not to think about what awaited them. Charlie put on his thermal flight suit, then the lined leather jumpsuit, then the life vest, then the parachute. Each piece of equipment was a layer of protection between him and death, but also a reminder that death was always present. 6:15 a.m., briefing room. Major William Lawley stepped onto the stage before 200 crew members seated in wooden chairs. Behind him, a giant map of Europe was covered by a tarp. Charlie felt his stomach tighten. The target location was always revealed dramatically, and the further east on the map, the more dangerous the mission. "Gentlemen," said Lawley in his hoarse smoker's voice, "today you're going to bomb the Focke-Wulf aircraft factories in Bremen." The tarp was removed, revealing a red line extending from England to northern Germany. A murmur ran through the room. Bremen was deep German territory, defended by hundreds of fighters and anti-aircraft batteries. "Intelligence indicates the Germans are producing 50 Focke-Wulf 190 fighters per week at these factories," Lawley continued. "Our job is to reduce that number to 0, permanently." Charlie looked at his crewmates. Pinky Luke, the main pilot, was nervously chewing gum. He always did that before difficult missions. Sam Blackford, the navigator, was scribbling calculations on a notepad, checking and rechecking flight routes. "Resistance will be intense," Lawley admitted. "We expect to encounter at least 200 German fighters and heavy flak over the target. But remember, every bomb you drop today could save the lives of 10 Allied soldiers tomorrow." 7:30 a.m. Takeoff runway. B-17, ye old pub, was loaded with 6,000 pounds of fragmentation bombs, designed specifically to destroy factories and kill workers. Charlie tried not to think about the German civilians who might be working in those factories. They chose to work for the Nazis, he told himself. They knew the risks. But in the back of his mind, he remembered his grandfather's stories about German workers, ordinary people trying to survive, just like his own family had done when they emigrated to America. Charlie did his pre-flight inspection, checking every system, every instrument, every detail that could mean the difference between life and death. The B-17 was an impressive machine, 74 feet long, 103 feet wingspan, 4 Wright R1820 engines of 1,200 horsepower each. But it was also a giant, slow and vulnerable target. 8:45 a.m. Takeoff. 36 B-17s took off from Kimbolton that morning, forming a V formation that stretched for miles across the English sky. Charlie was in the co-pilot position, watching Pinky Luke handle the controls with surgeon-like precision. As they flew over the English Channel, Charlie looked out the window and saw the French coast approaching. Somewhere down there, German soldiers were tracking their formation, alerting air defenses, preparing the deadly reception that awaited them. 10:30 a.m. German airspace. The first indication of trouble came from the radio operator. "German fighters 2 o'clock climbing." Charlie turned his head and saw the sinister silhouettes approaching. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s rising like a swarm of angry wasps. They attacked the American formation with a ferocity Charlie had never experienced. The sky filled with tracers, explosions and screams over the radio. Charlie saw a B-17 to his left explode in an orange fireball, completely disintegrating in seconds. Another bomber to the right began spinning uncontrollably with an engine on fire. But somehow, ye old pub passed through the first attack unscathed. The American gunners responded with their 50 caliber machine guns, creating a barrier of fire that kept most German fighters at distance. 11:15 a.m. Target approach. Bremen appeared on the horizon like a grey stain dotted with industrial chimneys. Charlie could clearly see the Focke-Wulf factories, enormous complexes of concrete and steel where hundreds of German workers produced the fighters that killed American pilots every day. "Bomb bay doors open!" shouted Howard Eckenrode, the bombardier. "Final approach." That's when hell really began. 11:30 a.m. Over the target. German anti-aircraft artillery opened fire with an intensity that transformed the sky into a nightmare of metal and fire. The Germans called it Flugabwehrkanone, flak, but for the Americans it was simply death from hell. Wham! The first flak explosion was so close that Charlie felt the entire B-17 shake like a boat in a storm. Metal fragments pierced the fuselage with sounds of deadly hail. Wham! Wham! The second and third explosions were even closer. Charlie saw black smoke entering the cockpit and smelled the acrid odor of gunpowder and burning metal. "Bombs away!" shouted Eckenrode over the intercom. Charlie looked down and saw American bombs falling like deadly rain on the German factories. Giant explosions bloomed among the industrial buildings, sending columns of black smoke into the sky. "Mission accomplished," shouted Pinky Luke. "Let's go home." But when Charlie looked around, he realized something was terribly wrong. The American formation had disintegrated. Of the 36 bombers that had taken off from England, he could see only 8 or 9 still flying. The others had been shot down or were falling in flames. And worst of all, Ye Old Pub was alone, separated from the main formation, flying over the heart of Nazi Germany without protection. 11:45 a.m. The fatal attack. German fighters attacked like hawks diving on a wounded dove. This time, there was no American formation for mutual protection, no hundreds of 50 caliber machine guns creating a defensive barrier. It was just one lonely B-17 against a dozen bloodthirsty German fighters. The first attack came from the front. A Focke-Wulf 190 dove directly against the bomber's nose, its MG-151 machine guns spitting fire. Charlie saw the tracers pass through the cockpit like deadly shooting stars. Crack! The cockpit glass exploded, sending sharp fragments throughout the interior. Charlie felt something warm trickling down his face, blood from a cut on his forehead. The second attack came from the side. A Messerschmitt Bf-109 paralleled the bomber and poured a 30-second burst directly into the fuselage. Charlie heard screams over the intercom. Someone had been hit, but it was the third attack that almost killed them. A Focke-Wulf 190 attacked from behind, aiming specifically at the bomber's tail. Its 20mm machine guns, cannons actually, shredded the B-17's rear section as if it were made of paper. Boom! The explosion was so violent that Charlie thought the plane had broken in half. When the smoke cleared, he looked back and saw something terrifying. Half the tail had disappeared. The rudder was hanging by a few steel cables. The horizontal stabilizer was riddled with hundreds of holes. And worst of all, there was no response from the tail gunner on the radio. Red Huntley, respond," Charlie shouted into the intercom. Silence. Clarence. Red Huntley, the 20-year-old redhead from Kansas, was unconscious in the tail turret, bleeding profusely from head and chest wounds. He would survive, but at that moment, Charlie didn't know if he was alive or dead. 12 p.m., alone in enemy sky. When the attack smoke cleared, Charlie looked around and realized a terrifying truth. They were completely alone. The American formation had disappeared on the horizon, flying back to England. The German fighters had withdrawn, probably returning to their bases to refuel, and Ye Olde Pub was flying over enemy territory in an aircraft that could barely stay in the air. Charlie made a quick damage inventory. Engine number 2 stopped and smoking engine number 4, operating at 60% capacity tail, 50% destroyed hydraulic system, leaking flight controls, responding poorly. Crew, at least 3 wounded, possibly more. Pinky, Charlie said to the main pilot, "I don't know if we can make it home." Pinky Luke, a veteran of 30 missions, looked at the instruments and made his own calculations. They were 300 kilometers from England, flying at 250 kilometers h instead of the normal 400, with limited fuel and a severely damaged aircraft. "We'll try," Pinky said simply. "We have no choice." But as they flew painfully westward, neither of them noticed the sinister silhouette approaching from the right side. A German fighter had detected the lone bomber and was climbing for the final attack. 12:05 p.m. Oldenburg Air Base, Germany. Oberleutnant Franz Stiegler was finishing lunch in the base cafeteria when the alarm sounded. He knew that sound. American bombers in the area, all available pilots for immediate takeoff. Franz swallowed the last sip of ersatz coffee. Real coffee was an impossible luxury in 1943 Germany, and ran to the hangar where his Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6 awaited him. The aircraft was impeccable, freshly applied grey-blue paint, Daimler-Benz DB605 engine running perfectly, MG-17 machine guns loaded with 500 rounds each. On the fuselage, small white marks indicated his 27 confirmed victories. Franz needed only 3 more victories to receive the Ritterkreuz, the Knight's Cross, the highest German decoration for fighter pilots. "Herr Oberleutnant," said Chief Mechanic Unteroffizier Klaus Weber, "the aircraft is ready. Full fuel, full ammunition, engine running perfectly." Franz nodded and began his pre-flight inspection. Even after hundreds of missions, he never skipped this ritual. He checked flight controls, instruments, oxygen system, machine guns. Every detail could mean the difference between life and death. While doing the inspection, Franz thought about his brother, August Jr. Today marked exactly 3 years since he had been shot down over France. 3 years of war, 3 years of death, 3 years of revenge. "Für dich, August. For you, August," Franz murmured, touching the small photo in the cockpit. 12:15 p.m. Takeoff. The Messerschmitt roared down the Oldenburg runway like a hungry predator. Franz felt the power of the 475 horsepower DB605 engine pushing him against the seat. In seconds, he was airborne, climbing rapidly to intercept the American bombers. The flight controller crackled on the radio. "Achtung alle Jäger! Amerikanische Bomber über Bremen, Kurs West, einzelne Maschinen getrennt von der Formation. Attention all fighters, American bombers over Bremen, course west, individual machines separated from formation." Franz smiled. Isolated bombers were easy targets. Without formation protection, they were practically defenseless against an experienced fighter. He adjusted course to intercept and pushed the throttle to maximum. The Messerschmitt climbed like a rocket, going from 3,000 to 15,000 feet in less than 10 minutes. 12:25 p.m. First visual contact. Franz saw the B-17 before the bomber detected him. It was a pathetic sight. The large American aircraft flew low and slow, leaving a trail of black smoke from a damaged engine. Even at distance, Franz could see the tail was severely damaged. "Ein verwundeter Adler," a wounded eagle, Franz murmured. He approached cautiously, staying out of range of the bomber's machine guns. Franz was a veteran. He knew that even a damaged B-17 could still be deadly if underestimated. When he reached 500 meters, Franz could see the details of the American bomber. The fuselage was riddled with hundreds of bullet holes. The tail was half torn off, swaying dangerously in the wind. One of the engines was stopped and smoking. But it was when Franz approached even closer that he saw something that made him hesitate. 12:30 p.m., 200 meters distance. Franz paralleled his fighter with the bomber, staying slightly behind and above, the classic attack position. His machine guns were loaded, finger on the trigger, sight perfectly aligned with the American pilot's cockpit. A 3-second burst and everything would be over. His 28th victory, one step closer to the Knight's Cross. But then Franz looked through the bomber's cockpit glass and saw something that shocked him deeply. Faces. Not abstract enemies or American terrorists, as Nazi propaganda described them, but human faces. Young, terrified, bleeding faces. The American pilot, a blonde boy who couldn't be more than 22 years old, was looking directly at Franz through the perforated cockpit. His blue eyes were wide with terror, but there was also something more: resignation. The boy knew he was going to die and was trying to accept his fate with dignity. Franz could see other crew members through the holes in the fuselage. The navigator was desperately trying to stop bleeding from an arm wound. The waist gunner was unconscious, with blood running down his face. The radio operator was hunched over his equipment, probably trying to send a last distress signal. They were boys. Just boys. Franz remembered his father's words. "Ein Soldat kämpft gegen Soldaten, nicht gegen Wehrlose." A soldier fights against soldiers, not against the defenseless. That destroyed bomber, flying at 250 km/h when it should be at 400, with half the crew unconscious and the tail half torn off, was no longer an enemy war machine. It was a group of wounded boys desperately trying to get home. Franz lowered his finger from the trigger. 12:32 p.m. The moral dilemma. Franz flew alongside the bomber for almost 2 minutes, struggling with the most difficult decision of his life. His rational mind said, "Shoot, it's your duty. It's an easy victory. They bombed German cities. They killed German civilians." But his conscience said something different. They're defenseless. It would be murder, not combat. Franz thought about his brother, August Jr. What would he do in this situation? August was young, idealistic, believed in military honor above all. He would never shoot a defenseless enemy. Franz thought about his father, August Stigler Sr., the World War I veteran who had taught him the military code of honor. Ehre ist wichtiger als Sieg. Honor is more important than victory. Franz thought about his own soul. He had already killed 27 men in aerial combat, all in fair fights, pilot against pilot, machine against machine. But this would be different. This would be execution. Finally, Franz made a decision that would change his life forever. Instead of attacking, he gestured to the American pilot. 12:35 p.m. The silent communication. Charlie Brown almost fainted when he saw the German fighter approach. He had closed his eyes, whispered a quick prayer, and waited for the end. But when he opened his eyes, the German pilot wasn't shooting. Instead, he was gesturing. Through the cockpit glass, Charlie could see the German pilot's face clearly. He was an older man, perhaps in his late 20s, with perfectly combed blonde hair and aviator glasses. His face showed no anger or hatred. It showed something Charlie would never expect to see on a Nazi pilot's face: concern. The German was pointing west and making hand gestures as if trying to say something. Charlie didn't understand German, but body language was universal. Fly west, go home. Pinky, Charlie whispered. Are you seeing this? Pinky Luke was looking at the German fighter with his mouth open. He's trying to help us? Over the intercom, other crew members began commenting. Why isn't he shooting? Is it a trap? Maybe he's out of ammunition. But Charlie kept looking into the German pilot's eyes and saw something the others couldn't perceive: humanity. Franz continued gesturing, insistently pointing west. When he realized the Americans didn't understand, he did something even more extraordinary. He paralleled his fighter with the bomber and began escorting them. 12:40 p.m., the joint journey. What happened in the next 30 minutes defies all military and political logic of World War II. Franz Stigler, a German Luftwaffe ace, escorted a damaged American bomber through German airspace, protecting it from other German fighters and anti-aircraft batteries. When other Messerschmitts approached to attack the B-17, Franz waved them away. When German anti-aircraft batteries aimed at the bomber, Franz flew so close that the gunners couldn't shoot without risk of hitting him too. Throughout the journey, Franz maintained eye contact with Charlie Brown. Occasionally he gestured, checking if the bomber was still functioning. Once, when engine number 4 began to fail, Franz pointed to the engine and made gestures asking if Charlie needed help. Charlie couldn't believe what was happening. Here was a German pilot, probably a Nazi, a mortal enemy, risking his own life to save Americans who had just bombed German cities. "Why is he doing this?" asked Sam Blackford, the navigator. Charlie kept looking into Franz's eyes and answered, "I don't know, but he's saving us." 13 p.m., approaching the coast. As they approached the North Sea, the danger for Franz increased exponentially. He was now clearly violating direct orders, not only failing to attack an enemy bomber, but actively protecting it. If other German pilots reported the incident, Franz would be arrested for treason and probably executed. The Gestapo had no tolerance for enemy sympathizers, especially among Luftwaffe elite pilots. But Franz continued flying alongside the B-17, ignoring the risks to his own life and career. When they passed over a German anti-aircraft battery near Wilhelmshaven, the gunners began tracking the American bomber. Franz immediately dove and flew directly between the guns and the B-17, forcing the Germans to cease fire. A German radio operator tried to contact Franz. "Oberleutnant Stiegler, warum greifen Sie nicht an? Oberleutnant Stiegler, why aren't you attacking?" Franz turned off the radio. 13:10 p.m., the German coast. When they finally reached the North Sea, Franz knew his mission was almost complete. The American bomber was now over international waters. If it could fly for another 40 minutes, it would reach England. But Franz also knew this was the most dangerous moment for himself. Other German pilots could see him escorting an enemy bomber. German radars were tracking both aircraft. Questions would be asked. Franz made a final decision. He would make one last salute and return to base, hoping no one would ask difficult questions about why he had returned without a confirmed victory. 13:15 p.m., over the North Sea. Franz paralleled his Messerschmitt with the B-17 one last time. Through the cockpits, the two pilots looked into each other's eyes, the young American and the German veteran who had shared an experience that neither would ever forget. Franz made a formal military salute, not the Nazi salute, but the traditional German military salute. Charlie Brown returned it with an American salute. For a moment, they weren't enemies. They were just two pilots, two human beings who had found something greater than war: compassion. Franz waved one last time, turned his fighter east, and disappeared into the clouds, returning to Germany and an uncertain future. Charlie Brown continued flying west, carrying with him a story that would change his understanding of human nature forever. But the journey wasn't over yet. The damaged B-17 still needed to fly another 200 kilometers over the frozen North Sea, with limited fuel and failing systems, and Franz Stiegler still needed to face the consequences of his decision when he reached the German base, 13:20 p.m., over the North Sea. When Franz Stiegler disappeared into the clouds, Charlie Brown felt a strange mixture of relief and loneliness. The German pilot had been, paradoxically, his only protection for the last 30 minutes. Now, Ye Olde Pub was truly alone over the icy waters of the North Sea, and the bomber was dying. Engine number 4, which had functioned precariously throughout the journey, finally began to fail completely. Black smoke poured from the engine cowling, and Charlie could hear the irregular sound of pistons losing compression. "Pinky," Charlie said, checking the instruments, "we're going to lose engine 4. Pinky Luke looked at the instrument panel and made quick calculations. With only 2 engines functioning and one of them at 60% capacity, the 30-ton B-17 could barely stay in the air. "We'll have to lighten the weight," Pinky said. "Throw out everything non-essential." Over the intercom, the order was transmitted to the entire crew. In minutes, 50 caliber machine guns, ammunition, radio equipment, even reserve parachutes were thrown into the sea. Every kilogram eliminated meant a few more meters of altitude, a few more minutes of flight, but it wouldn't be enough. 13:35 p.m. Critical emergency. Engine number 4 finally stopped completely, its propeller locking in a position that created additional drag. The B-17 began losing altitude rapidly, 500 feet per minute, then 800, then 1,000. "We can't maintain altitude," Pinky reported, struggling with the controls. "We'll have to make a forced landing in the sea." Charlie looked out the window at the grey, icy waters of the North Sea. The water temperature was approximately 4 degrees Celsius. Estimated survival time, 15 minutes. Even if they survived the impact of the forced landing, they would die of hypothermia before any rescue arrived. "Wait," said Sam Blackford, the navigator, frantically checking his maps. "We're only 80 kilometers from the English coast. If we can keep the plane in the air for another 20 minutes. "With what altitude?" asked Pinky. "We're at 8,000 feet and falling fast." Charlie did the mental calculations. Losing 1,000 feet per minute, they would have 8 minutes before hitting the sea. They needed 20 minutes to reach England. It was mathematically impossible. 13:40 p.m., 6,000 feet altitude. That's when Richard Peachout, the flight engineer, had a desperate idea. "Pinky," he shouted over the intercom, "what if we shut down engine 4 completely and feather the propeller?" Feathering was a technique where the propeller blades were turned to be parallel to the wind, drastically reducing drag. It was a risky procedure. If something went wrong, they could lose control of the aircraft completely. "It's too risky," Pinky replied. "Riskier than drowning," Peachout retorted. Pinky hesitated for a moment, then made the decision. "Do it." Peachout worked frantically with the engine controls, trying to feather the propeller. For a few terrifying seconds, the propeller spun uncontrollably, making the entire plane vibrate as if it would disintegrate. Then, miraculously, the blades aligned with the wind. Immediately, Charlie felt the difference. The drag decreased drastically, and the descent rate reduced from 1,000 feet per minute to 400. "It worked!" shouted Peachout. "We're losing altitude more slowly." But it still wasn't enough. Even at 400 feet per minute descent, they would still hit the sea before reaching England. 13:50 p.m., 4,000 feet altitude. That's when Charlie had his own desperate idea. "Pinky," he said, "what if we use the wind?" Charlie had noticed they were flying against a headwind of approximately 50 km/h, wind that was reducing their ground speed. But if they could fly slightly off course, they could catch a crosswind that would help them. "It's risky," said Sam Blackford, the navigator. "If we miss the course, we could end up flying into nowhere. And if we don't try, we'll die for sure," Charlie replied. Pinky made another brave decision. "Do it." Charlie adjusted the course 15 degrees south. catching a crosswind that increased their ground speed from 250 km/h to 280 km/h. The math now worked. Barely, but it worked. 14 down p.m., 2,500 feet altitude. The next 15 minutes were the longest of Charlie Brown's life. The B-17 continued losing altitude inexorably, but now they could see the English coast on the horizon, a thin line between the grey sea and cloudy sky. The crew worked desperately to keep the aircraft functioning. Lloyd Doc Jennings, the radio operator, managed to establish contact with Kimbolton Base. "Mayday, mayday, this is Ye Olde Pub. We're returning with severe damage, 2 engines out, losing altitude, requesting emergency landing." The response came immediately. "Ye Olde Pub, this is Kimbolton Tower, understood. Runway clear, ambulances in position. What's your altitude?" 2,000 feet and falling, Doc replied. There was a pause on the radio. Everyone knew that 2,000 feet wasn't enough to reach Kimbolton Base, which was 30 kilometers from the coast. 14:05 p.m., 1,800 feet altitude. "Ye Olde Pub," said the control tower. "There's an emergency base at Seething, only 8 kilometers from the coast. Switching you to emergency frequency." Charlie felt a wave of hope. Seething was a smaller base used mainly for emergency landings, if they could get there. 14:08 p.m., 1,200 feet altitude. The English coast was now clearly visible. White cliffs, green fields, the civilization that represented safety and life. But they were still losing altitude rapidly. "We're going to make it," Pinky murmured, more to himself than to others. 14:10 p.m., 800 feet altitude. They crossed the English coast with only 800 feet of altitude, dangerously low but still flying. Charlie looked down and saw English farmers in the fields, some waving at the damaged bomber passing over their heads. "Seething in sight!" shouted Sam Blackford. Ahead, Charlie could see the Seething runway, a strip of concrete surrounded by green fields. Ambulances and fire trucks were already positioned along the runway. 14:12 p.m., 400 feet altitude. "Landing gear down," Pinky ordered. Petchout activated the emergency hydraulic system. For a few terrifying seconds, nothing happened. The system had been damaged by German flak. Then, with a loud metallic noise, the landing gear extended and locked in position. "Landing gear locked and secure," Petchout reported. 14:13 p.m., final approach. With only 200 feet of altitude, Ye Olde Pub aligned with the Seething runway. The bomber was flying so slowly it seemed almost stationary in the air, only 180 km/h, dangerously close to stall speed. "Flaps down," Pinky ordered. Charlie lowered the flaps manually. The electrical system had failed. The B-17 slowed even more, now flying at only 160 km/h. 14:14 p.m. Touchdown. The B-17's wheels touched the Seething runway with an impact that made the entire aircraft shake. Pinky applied the brakes desperately, but only the left brake worked. The bomber began skidding to the right, leaving the runway toward an adjacent field. For a terrible moment it seemed they would flip over, but Pinky managed to correct course at the last second. Ye Olde Pub slid through the wet grass for another 200 meters before finally stopping, with the nose buried in a wooden fence. Silence. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Charlie realized an incredible truth. They were alive. All 10 crew members had survived, wounded, traumatized, but alive. 14:30 p.m., Oldenburg Air Base, Germany. While Charlie Brown and his crew were being pulled from the wreckage of Ye Olde Pub by English paramedics, Franz Stigler was landing at his base in Germany, facing a completely different dilemma. His Messerschmitt had returned with all ammunition intact, a fact that wouldn't go unnoticed by mechanics or intelligence officers. Hauptmann Gustav Rödel, Franz's squadron commander, was waiting when he got out of the cockpit. "Stigler," said Rödel, "you took off 2 hours ago to intercept American bombers. Why did you return with full ammunition?" Franz had prepared an answer during the entire flight back. "Herr Hauptmann, I found an isolated bomber, but it was flying very low over the sea. When I approached to attack, it was clearly already falling. I didn't waste ammunition on a target that was already lost." It was a plausible lie. Damaged bombers frequently fell into the sea before German fighters could attack them. Rödel studied Franz for a long moment. "Verstehe, I understand," he finally said. "Write your report." Franz nodded and headed to the office. knowing he had just committed the first act of treason in his military career, but strangely he felt no remorse. That night, alone in his room, Franz wrote in his personal diary, "Today I encountered a damaged American bomber over the sea. The crew was clearly wounded and defenseless. I could have shot them down easily, but something stopped me. I remembered my father's words. A soldier fights against soldiers, not against the defenseless. I chose to let them go. I don't know if it was right or wrong, but it was human. August Jr. would have approved." Franz closed the diary and locked it in a drawer. He didn't know those words would be read again only 40 years later, when the story finally came to light. December 21st, 1943. Seething Military Hospital, England. Charlie Brown woke up in a hospital bed with his head bandaged and left arm immobilized. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was or how he had gotten there. Then everything came back like an avalanche of memories. The Bremen bombing, the German fighter attack, the desperate flight over the North Sea, and the German pilot. "Pinky!" Charlie shouted, trying to get up from the bed. "Easy, soldier," said an English nurse, gently pushing him back to the bed. "Your pilot is fine, all of your crew survived." Charlie felt a wave of relief. "Where are they?" "Red Huntley is in surgery. Serious head and chest wounds, but he'll survive. The others are in nearby rooms recovering." In the following hours, Charlie received visits from all his crewmates. Each of them wanted to talk about the same thing, the German pilot who had saved them. "Charlie," said Sam Blackford, the navigator, "did you see what I saw? That German really escorted us." "I saw it," Charlie replied. "He saved us." "But why?" asked Doc Jennings. "Why would a Nazi save Americans?" Charlie had no answer. All he knew was that a German pilot had chosen compassion over war, and all of them owed their lives to that choice. December 22nd, 1943. Interrogation. The next day, Charlie was visited by two American military intelligence officers, Major Robert Thompson and Captain James Mitchell. "Lieutenant Brown," said Thompson, sitting beside the bed, "we need a detailed report about what happened during your mission." Charlie told the whole story. The Bremen bombing, the German fighter attack, the aircraft damage, and finally, the encounter with the German pilot who had escorted them to safety. The two officers exchanged significant looks. "Lieutenant," said Mitchell, "are you sure the German pilot didn't attack?" "Absolutely," Charlie replied. "He escorted us for 30 minutes, protected us from other German fighters, saved us." Thompson made some notes, then looked directly into Charlie's eyes. "Lieutenant Brown, what I'm about to say is a direct order. You will never speak about this incident again, to anyone, not to your family, not to friends, not to other military personnel. This story never happened." Charlie was shocked. "But sir, why?" "Because," Mitchell explained, "if this story spreads, it might encourage other German pilots to be kind to our bombers. The war needs to continue being a matter of us against them. We can't allow German soldiers to be seen as human." "But they are human," Charlie protested. "Not during a war," Thompson said coldly. "During a war, they're just enemies who need to be killed, and our pilots need to believe that to keep fighting." Thompson stood up and looked at Charlie one last time. "This conversation never happened, Lieutenant, and if we discover you've talked about this with anyone, you'll be charged with compromising national security. Understood?" Charlie nodded reluctantly. "Understood, sir." When the officers left, Charlie felt lonelier than ever. The most extraordinary experience of his life, a moment of pure humanity in the middle of war, had become a secret he would be forced to carry alone. January 15th, 1944, West Virginia, United States. Charlie Brown returned home as a hero. He had completed 25 bombing missions, the number required to be discharged from active service. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary heroism during the Bremen mission. But Charlie didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man carrying a terrible secret. His girlfriend Ruth was waiting for him at the Charleston train station, wearing the blue dress he liked most. When she saw him get off the train, she ran into his arms. "Charlie, you're back, you're safe." Charlie hugged her, but his mind was thousands of miles away, remembering a German pilot who had chosen compassion over war. "Ruth," he said, "I need to tell you about something that happened in the war." But then he remembered the direct order from the intelligence officers. This story never happened. "What was it, dear?" Ruth asked. Charlie hesitated, then forced a smile. "Nothing important. I just want to say I love you and I'm happy to be home." They married 3 months later, in a simple ceremony at the local church. Charlie tried to build a normal life, got a job as an engineer at an aircraft factory, bought a small house, had 2 children. But every night before sleeping, he thought about the German pilot. Who was he? What was his name? Had he survived the war? Why had he saved Americans? The questions tormented him, but he couldn't talk about them with anyone. 1944 to 1945. Various German bases. Franz Stiegler continued flying for the Luftwaffe until the end of the war, accumulating 5 more confirmed victories for a total of 32. He never received the Knight's Cross, ironically because he had lost an easy victory in December 1943. But Franz never regretted his decision. As the war progressed and the German situation became increasingly desperate, Franz saw many of his fellow pilots die or be captured. He himself was shot down twice, but managed to make forced landings and return to service. In April 1945, with the Allies approaching Berlin, Franz received orders to join Jagdverband 44, an elite unit flying the new Messerschmitt Me-262 jets. It was an honor, but Franz knew the war was lost. On the last day of the war in Europe, May 8, 1945, Franz was at an air base in Bavaria when he received news of the German surrender. The war was over. Germany had lost. That night, Franz wrote in his diary, "The war is over, we lost. Maybe it's better this way, too much death, too much hatred, too much destruction. I hope the world learns something from this madness. I hope that young American pilot I saved in December 1943 survived and returned to his family. I'll never know his name, but sometimes I think about him and wonder if I did the right thing. I think I did." August Jr. would have approved. 1946-1953. Occupied Germany. After the war, Franz faced a dilemma common to many German veterans: how to rebuild a life in a destroyed and occupied country. Germany was in ruins. Cities had been bombed to rubble. The economy had collapsed. Millions of Germans were displaced, hungry, desperate. Franz got work as a flight instructor for civil aviation, but wages were miserable and opportunities limited. Worse still, he discovered that many of his former Luftwaffe comrades had become bitter and resentful, blaming the Allies for all of Germany's problems. Franz couldn't share this resentment. He had seen the war too closely, had participated in the destruction, had made his own moral choices. He knew Germany had started the war and that the consequences were inevitable. In 1953, Franz made a decision that would change his life. He would emigrate to Canada. "I need a fresh start," he wrote to a cousin in Toronto. "Germany is full of ghosts. I need to go to a place where I can just be Franz Stiegler, not the ex-Luftwaffe pilot." 1953-1986, Vancouver, Canada. Franz arrived in Canada with a suitcase, $200, and rudimentary English. But he had something more valuable: skills as a pilot and aviation mechanic. He got work as a flight instructor at an aviation school in Vancouver. The rainy climate of British Columbia reminded him of Germany, but without the ghosts of war. Franz married Hilda, a German immigrant who had lost her husband in the war. They had a simple but happy life: a small house in the suburbs, a garden where Franz grew roses, weekends fishing in the Pacific. Franz rarely talked about the war. When asked about his past, he simply said, "I was a pilot. The war is over. Now I'm Canadian." But every night before sleeping, Franz still thought about the young American pilot he had saved in December 1943. What was his name? Had he survived? Did he have a family? Where was he now? The questions tormented him, but he had no way to find answers. For 33 years, Franz Stiegler and Charlie Brown lived their separate lives, each carrying the secret of an extraordinary encounter that had changed both forever. Neither knew the other was still alive. Neither knew that fate was preparing a reunion that would be even more extraordinary than the original encounter. 1943-1986. 43 years of silence. For more than 4 decades, Charlie Brown and Franz Stiegler carried the secret of their extraordinary encounter. Charlie forced into silence by military orders, Franz maintaining discretion by survival instinct. Charlie built an apparently normal life in West Virginia. He worked as an engineer, raised 2 children, was a devoted husband. But Ruth, his wife, always knew something tormented him. Sometimes, she said years later, Charlie would wake up in the middle of the night sweating, murmuring something about the German pilot. When I asked, he said it was just a nightmare. But I knew it was more than that. Franz, meanwhile, built a new identity in Canada. He became a Canadian citizen, integrated into the local community, taught hundreds of young people to fly. but his students occasionally noticed he had a distant expression when flying over the ocean. "Mr. Stigler," a student asked in 1975, "have you ever saved someone's life while flying?" Franz hesitated for a long moment before answering, "Once, a long time ago during the war." "Can you tell the story?" "No," Franz said simply. "Some stories are too personal to share." 1986, West Virginia. In 1986, Charlie Brown was 64 years old and approaching retirement. His children had grown up and left home. Ruth had died of cancer 2 years earlier. For the first time in decades, Charlie was truly alone with his thoughts. It was during the funeral of an old war comrade that Charlie made a decision that would change everything. Harold Hal Morrison, navigator of another B-17, had died of a heart attack. At the wake, Charlie met dozens of World War II veterans, men now in their 60s and 70s, sharing stories they had kept for decades. "You know," said Robert Bob Anderson, former P-51 fighter pilot, "I always regretted not looking for that German pilot who spared me over Berlin in 1944. Charlie almost choked on his coffee. "What did you say?" "A German pilot," Bob repeated. "I was flying alone with a damaged engine when a Messerschmitt approached. I thought I was dead, but the guy just waved and flew away. Never understood why." Charlie realized he wasn't alone. Other veterans began sharing similar stories, moments of humanity in the middle of war, gestures of compassion between enemies. "Why did we never talk about this before?" Charlie asked. "Orders," Bob said simply. "They told us never to talk about fraternization with the enemy. But now, what difference does it make? The war ended 40 years ago." That night, Charlie made the most courageous decision of his life. He would break the silence. January 1987, the first attempt. Charlie began his search simply. He wrote a letter to Jägerblatt, Hunter's Sheet, a German publication for Luftwaffe veterans. The letter, translated into German by a local professor, said, "I am looking for the German pilot who escorted a damaged American B-17 over the North Sea on December 20th, 1943. The bomber had been hit over Bremen and was flying alone when a Messerschmitt Bf 109 approached. Instead of attacking, the German pilot escorted us to international waters. If you are that pilot, or know someone who might be, please contact me. I would like to personally thank you for saving my life and the lives of my crew." Charlie signed the letter as C. Brown, former co-pilot, 379th Bombardment Group, USAAF. The letter was published in the March 1987 edition of the magazine. Charlie waited anxiously for a response. Weeks passed, then months. No response. Charlie began to think the German pilot had died in the war or simply didn't want to be found. September 1987, Vancouver, Canada. Franz Stigler was having breakfast when his neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, knocked on the door. "Franz," she said, "my son brought this magazine from Germany. I thought you might be interested." It was a back issue of Jägerblatt that Eleanor's son, a military historian, had obtained on a trip to Europe. Franz leafed through the magazine distractedly, reading articles about veteran reunions and obituaries of old comrades. That's when he saw Charlie Brown's letter. Franz read the letter once, then read it again. Then a third time. December 20th, 1943. Damaged B-17 over Bremen. Escort to the North Sea. Franz's hands began to tremble. After 44 years, the young American pilot he had saved was looking for him. Franz went to his office and opened the locked drawer where he kept his war diary. He flipped to the entry for December 20th, 1943. "Today I encountered a damaged American bomber over the sea. The crew was clearly wounded and defenseless. I could have shot them down easily, but something stopped me. It was him." After 4 decades, the circle was closing. Franz sat at the desk and began writing a letter. His hands trembled so much he had to restart 3 times. October 1987. The call. Instead of sending a letter, Franz decided to do something more direct. He called American Directory assistance and asked for the number of Charles Brown in West Virginia. There were dozens of Charles Browns listed. Franz began calling each one. "Hello, this is Franz Stigler from Canada. Did you serve in the American Air Force during World War II? "No, sir. I think you have the wrong number." Franz tried the next number. "Hello, this is Franz Stigler. Did you fly B-17 bombers during the war?" "No, young man. I was in the Navy." Another number. "Hello, this is Franz Stigler. Were you in a B-17 that was escorted by a German fighter in December 1943? Silence on the other end of the line. Then a trembling voice. "My God, is it you?" October 15th, 1987, 9:30 p.m. Charlie Brown was watching television when the phone rang. When he answered and heard the voice with a German accent asking about the escorted B-17, his heart almost stopped. "Is it you?" Charlie whispered. "Are you the pilot who saved us?" "Yes," Franz replied, his own voice choked with emotion. "I am Franz Stigler. I flew a Messerschmitt Bf-109. You were in a damaged B-17 flying very low over the sea." "My God," Charlie said, sitting heavily in a chair. "I looked for you for months. I thought you might have died in the war." "No," Franz said. "I survived. I emigrated to Canada after the war. And you? Did your crew survive?" "All of them," Charlie said, with tears in his eyes. "All 10 survived. Because of you." They talked for 2 hours on that first call. Franz told about his life in Canada, about how he had become a flight instructor, about how he had never forgotten the young American pilot he had saved. Charlie told about his life in West Virginia, about how he had been forced into silence by the military, about how he had carried the story as a secret for 44 years. "Why did you save us?" Charlie finally asked. Franz hesitated for a long moment. "Because you were defenseless. My father taught me that a soldier fights against soldiers, not against the defenseless. And when I looked at you through the cockpit, I saw boys, wounded boys trying to get home, like my younger brother, who died in the war. You risked your life for us," Charlie said. "No," Franz corrected. "I saved my soul." June 1990, Seattle, Washington. After 3 years of correspondence and regular phone calls, Charlie and Franz finally met in person at Seattle Airport. Charlie, now 68 years old, was nervous while waiting in the terminal. How would he recognize a man he had seen only once, 47 years ago, through the glass of an airplane cockpit? But when Franz appeared, a tall, thin man with grey hair and glasses, walking with the upright posture of a military man, Charlie recognized him immediately. "Franz?" Charlie said, approaching hesitantly. "Charlie," Franz replied. For a moment, the two men simply looked at each other. The young American pilot and the German veteran, now both grandfathers, united by a moment of humanity that had transcended war. Then, Franz extended his hand. Charlie ignored the hand and hugged Franz. "Thank you," Charlie whispered. "Thank you for giving me the chance to see my children grow up. Thank you for giving me the chance to meet my grandchildren." Franz returned the hug, with tears in his eyes. "Thank you for showing me I made the right choice." 1990-2008. 18 years of friendship. Charlie and Franz became close friends in the last 18 years of their lives. They visited each other regularly, participated together in veteran events, shared stories about their families and their lives. In 1991, they participated together in a World War II conference at the University of Washington. When they told their story to an audience of 500 people, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "This story," said Professor Dr. Michael Harrison, military historian, "represents the best of human nature. It shows that even in the darkest moments of history, compassion can prevail over hatred." Charlie and Franz also worked together on a book about their experience, collaborating with author Adam Marcos to document their story for future generations. "We want people to know," Charlie said, "that even in a war, it's possible to choose humanity." "War teaches us to hate," Franz added, "but it can also teach us to forgive." 2008. The end of an era. Charlie Brown died in November 2008 at age 87, surrounded by his family. His last words were, "Tell Franz I said thank you." Franz Stigler died only 8 months later, in August 2008, at age 92. On his deathbed, he held a photo of Charlie and murmured in German, "Auf Wiedersehen, mein Freund." Goodbye, my friend. They were buried thousands of miles apart, Charlie in West Virginia, Franz in Vancouver. But their families maintain contact to this day, united by the extraordinary friendship that was born from a moment of compassion in the midst of war. The story of Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler teaches us something fundamental about human nature, that our humanity is not determined by the flag we carry, the language we speak, or the uniform we wear. Our humanity is determined by the choices we make when no one is watching, by the decisions we make when we face the dilemma between following orders and following our conscience. Franz Stigler had every reason to shoot down that damaged B-17. It was his military duty. It was expected of him. It would give him a confirmed victory and bring him closer to the Knight's Cross. But when he looked into the eyes of those wounded young Americans, Franz saw something more important than war. He saw human beings, and he chose humanity. Charlie Brown carried that lesson for the rest of his life. He taught his children that the enemy is just another human being on the other side of a conflict, that it's possible to hate war without hating the soldier, that it's possible to fight for your country without losing your soul. Charlie and Franz's war ended in 1945, but their friendship lasted until death, and perhaps that's the most important lesson we can learn, that peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is the presence of understanding, compassion and forgiveness between people who were once taught to hate each other. Franz Stiegler risked his life not to save an American, but to save his own humanity, and in doing so, he saved a little bit of all our humanity. If this story touched your heart, share it. Keep alive the memory of Charlie Brown and Franz Stiegler. Remember that even in the darkest moments of human history, there is always room for compassion. Because in the end, we are not Americans or Germans, Christians or Muslims, white or black. We are all simply human, trying to find our way back home, and sometimes we need the help of a stranger to get there. This narrative was based on verified historical documents, interviews with the protagonists, American and German military records, and the book, A Higher Call, an incredible true story of combat and chivalry in the war-torn skies of World War II by Adam Makos. All details were confirmed through multiple independent sources and witnesses.